And we're live. G'day, everyone. Welcome to Talking Daughters of Khaine. It is the coach here. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all safe. And in today's episode, we are talking, as I mentioned before, surprise, Daughters of Khaine. And I'm here with my good friend, formerly known as Danye. It is Dayne. Dayne, how are you, sir?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Really well, man. Really well. So Dayne has been brought here because he is an expert when it comes to Daughters of Khaine. He's been playing them for a long time. You are an expert. And, you know, you put your theory into practice when it came to CanCon, the world's largest Age of Sigmar event in the world, and, you know, every year. And in 2020, we had over 200 players. I think it was like 219 players. And you landed in 16th spot. So to land 16th spot in an army that is underrepresented in the meta right now, I thought there was no better person to talk about this faction and understand how to use the Daughters of Khaine in the current landscape. About 2 years ago or a year and a half after the battle tome came out, I had some experts talk about the battle tome, and you know, very much was about the witch elves and spamming witch elves. But a lot's changed, and that's what I really want to hear from you, Dayne. I want to understand, how do we bring Daughters of Khaine into 2020 and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, a lot has changed, so it'd be interesting to go over most of it.
Other than your CanCon representation, is there anything that you want to, who are you? Who's the man behind the amazing list?
Well, I'm Dayne, so I've been in AOS pretty much since it started. So I went looking for fantasy, and surprise, surprise, didn't exist. The world blew up, and went into Sylvaneth for about a year and a half, 2 years, till Daughters of Khaine dropped, and I've been pretty much playing them non-stop. So
yeah, they're a great army. They're underrepresented. I could keep saying that till the cows come home. You got into them before contrast.
CanCon. And yeah,
there was one.
CanCon. Yep.
That's pretty crazy.
Not the only Marathi though.
No. People are taking Marathi, looking at you, Sam Morgan. Yes. So you know, Daughters of Khaine, we've kind of, you know, set the landmark. They were an army that it came out a long time ago. They had a cool book, and they were doing quite well in the meta, but they've kind of dropped off in representation for a while. So you mentioned you've been playing them for a long time now. What drew you to the Daughters of Khaine over all the other factions?
Oh, man, pretty much the aesthetic. So, I mean, the best trailer that's ever happened in the World of Warhammer previews, that just, I was just blown out of my seat. And since then, so Canary, heart renders, and just boobs, man, boobs. So, and I love painting skin. That's a weird thing to say, but yeah, one of my favorite things to paint. So it's been a pleasure to paint, actually.
It's, from memory, that trailer dropped at CanCon 2018, I think it was. And I remember sitting in, I think day one had finished at CanCon, and I was sitting in my little hotel room at the time, and I'm watching this video. I watched it 3 times. I then watched like Vince Venturella's, recap of, I think it was LVO. And I'm just like, man, this sounds so friggin' amazing. Marathi, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what this is going to do.
I had the same reaction with the previous one of the Warband. So coming out for, Warcry. So I think I watched that about 4 or 5 times as well. So, oh man, I'm looking forward to those. So it looks like with their the shadows that are modeled in, they might have a deep strike mechanic, I'm hoping, but yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll see.
So other than that hype video, because that's just one of the hype videos. Okay, I remember seeing Deepkin, and I'm like, man, fish elves, amazing. And I never really executed on it. So other than that really cool hype video, what drew you to the Daughters of Khaine? Sell me on this army.
Honestly, the thing that was happening, I was trying to get my partner back into Warhammer, because she played a bit of Sylvaneth. She wasn't bad. Broke my dir through, which is unfortunate. But then she said she might get into it if I got witch elves. And then so, decided to get a whole army, and under the pretense of getting her back into the game. And then, as happens, the wife never gets into it, and I got a whole army. But yeah, I think I ended up having about 8,000 points at one point. So before I sold them off, I had 3 of the Christmas Battle Force boxes sitting on my shelves. But yeah, They're an expensive army to collect, though. Oh my god, I did not realize what I'd signed up for. So the amount of witch elves, I think I've got between witch elves and Sisters of Slaughter about 120, and it's $70 a box, which you're only getting them in boxes individually. That's what, $840 just in foot troops.
Dayne, you're meant to be selling me on the idea. You're not meant to be turning me off it.
It's the play style as well, though. Like, after they got a bit more teased and whatnot, so I'm kind of known for fast combat armies. Even when I was running Sylvaneth, I was running like the +2 to charge on the general and whatnot. So I just like to get in, get stuff done. It's a really fun army to play, and there is multiple play styles, even though there's a lot of people that says there's only one. But yeah, we'll get to that.
So there are. I'm really drawn to the fact that they've got some really cool models. You know, they've got some very interesting models from like the Canary to the snakes. You get to play with blood effects, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think I've got blood on everything I own that's Daughters of Khaine. But yeah, Canary and all the new sculpts are just hands down fabulous. I'm painting snakes at the moment, getting a unit of 10 of them ready for the new season, and yeah. The sculpts are just fantastic. Morathi being a 2-piece as well, and having the interesting mechanics that she does. And Daughters of Khaine also just have a lot of interesting mechanics that not a lot of armies do have. So
yeah, absolutely. You got some beautiful monsters. You've got some, nice little the Avatar of Cain. There's some really cool stuff in the Daughters. So it's a great piece, and I hope to see more on the table. Talk me through the strengths. Let me understand, because I've experienced mostly the witch elves. Not many people in my local scene have been running things like the snakes. Yes, I've played Canary. Yes, I've played Morathi. But I feel like there's half this army that I haven't really had an exposure to yet on the tabletop. So at a very high level, what are they good at? Like, what's their strengths?
Oh, well, the keys you've got to work around with Daughters of Khaine, really, you've either got high durability with your Agnar and stuff, or you've pretty got high movement across the board with your run and charge and your basic foot troops. But your snakes are base movement 8, your Canary are 18. I mean, snakes are fabulous. They can be, but the trouble is getting into combat with that 8. The 8 is good, but sometimes it's just difficult to get them in. One of my favorites actually is that's often poo-pooed is Life Takers. They're not the melee version of the Harpies. They're one of my favorites. So I had a unit of 10 of them once take out a 12 block ogres. So I took out 8 of the ogres with just their melee attacks, and then battle shock the rest off. It was bloody grouse. But snakes have got a place, definitely, especially in. Probably Draichi Ganeth is one of the better places for snakes, because they get +1 to hit, which affects their mortal wound touch. So you can have them hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s with their normal attack, and then hitting on 3s, re-rolling if you want them to. But they're obviously bloody good in Hagnar as well, but everyone knows that. So you see 20 blocks quite often in Hagnar.
And that's another really good point, is that most of the Daughters of Khaine armies I've seen have been the Hagnar, which we know has a lot of after saves. And I feel like there's so many other temples that we haven't really explored, especially with some of those ones that buff the other parts of the army, which people were just flooding like 120. You said it yourself, 120, 140 witch elves and Sisters of Slaughter. Have a couple of hag queens that were kind of buffing them up. Maybe a Morathi, but usually it was just this big flood of witch elves that were just really hard to take down, and just threw lots and lots and lots of dice at you.
Almost 100% of lists as well, except those generally in a Temple Nest build will have a cauldron as well. And I absolutely detest the cauldron. It's one of the most reverse kind of, it kind of limits your play style. You really have to castle around it. Your buffs are all 7-8 inches or 18 for the blood shield. And I just don't like the play style it induces. So it really kind of limits the direction of your army building as well, especially if you go into Slaughter Troop or Cauldron Guard. But there's a fair few play styles with it, but you're always kind of central circling around this cauldron and with your buffs. And I just find that pretty boring.
Not your style.
No, I run a whole bunch of foot troops and that's it. So no cauldron for me. I used to have one that I ran for a while and I had it on a dragon to try and make it cool and get myself into it. But at the end of the day, I just can't be bothered.
Well, I'm glad you're selling me on Daughters of Khaine. I can hear the enthusiasm when it comes to the War Altar, but I know you've done incredibly well. And what we're going to do today is I've got one of your lists that we're going to go through a little bit later, but I want to bring your experience to the table because you have been playing with this now since the Battle Tome dropped, which is, again, it's one of the oldest Battle Tomes that we now currently have. Yeah. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about the allegiance, how it all works in I guess Age of Sigmar 2.0, the Soul Wars edition. Maybe a little bit about the temples. I know Hagnar is the #1 temple that people were going to. Is there any legs in the others? And then we'll kind of unpack a little bit more in one of your lists. But obviously, this is just one of many lists. There's no silver bullet. It's not to say this is the only list to run, but this was just an example of how you brought the abilities to life.
Yeah, and there's definitely been some changes to my list that I ran at CanCon already as well. So it's always changing.
Well, I mean, the meta's always changing, right? Every month, after CanCon, we had the Wrath of the Everchosen, so Nurgle and Khorne got a nice little buff. Archaon's now causing terror. Seraphon have now hit the table. We've got new Zench. So the answers that you had at CanCon are now not the answers that you need today. And who knows what happens with the new Pointy Elves, what happens with Gargants, what happens after that. So, all right.
Absolutely.
So I'll take that little nod as let's get into it. So what I might do, Danye, is it's Dayne. It's a running joke from previous episodes. So I'm going to read through the battle traits and some of the things that you get by Allegiance Daughters of Khaine. And I'd love your insights and your take on like what does it mean and how do you leverage it and get that real finite kind of knowledge out of you. So the first battle trait you're going to get is a fanatical faith, which you roll a dice each time a wound or a mortal wound is allocated to a friendly Daughters of Khaine model. On a 6+, it is negated. So what does that mean, and how do you build around that?
So that's pretty much obviously just a DPR save. You make the most out of that in Hagnar, but depending on that and turning everything into kind of an anvil is not the direction I wanted to go in. So going instead in Calibron direction. But it's good to have, especially when you have like 5 or 6 mortal wound spells coming at your heroes and you ignore one. So and your heroes left alive on 1 wound. That's just brilliant. But it's just those little bits that kind of keep you alive and keep you in the game.
And if you haven't read the book, there are ways to bring that down or to be able to get additional saves. So it's nice to see that, battle wide, everything is getting a 6+. I always find it funny that you do Legions of Nagash better than Death can, because they've got to stay wholly within the range of a hero, while you get this no matter where they are on the board.
Yeah, I got a feeling that'll change in the new book with a lot of things, but yeah, it's bloody awesome for now.
So right now we know that you're getting a 6+ additional save to wounds and mortal wounds.
Yes.
The second one is the Blood Rights. So the Blood Rights say friendly Daughters of Khaine units gain the ability of each battle round. So as shown on the table. So on the right-hand side, there is a table we've got here. So there's 5+. So what happens? So for example, in the second battle round, reroll 1s to a friendly Daughters of Khaine, run, and also charge. You've got some other rules here, such as what else do you get? Reroll hit rolls of 1 for the unit. In addition, if the unit's an avatar of Cain, it's always counted as animated. Reroll wound rolls of 1. Reroll save rolls of 1. In addition, you don't take battle shock. So what is this Blood Rights table? How do you look at this? How do you build around it?
It's kind of just a passive utility buff. I mean, it's nice. It gives you increased dependency. Like you can depend on a lot more of your rolls. There are also ways to increase it. So your units can go ahead in the Blood Rights table. There's a prayer and I believe there's a command trait as well. But the command traits are pretty useless unless you're using traits you can have, which doesn't dictate your command trait. But they make those double 1 charges and stuff just not an issue. So you roll a 1 on your charge on your second turn, and yeah, that's okay. Just not an issue at all. It just adds a lot of reliability. So, and that's really what the army's built around, is reliability in its attacks and its movement, all those kind of things. Especially when you need those run rolls as well. You don't have to spend that CP if you roll that one. It's lovely.
So when I look at this blood rights table, and I'm assuming, I'm a new player, I'm going to play as if I'm a new player reading this book. And I look at this to go, right, well, I'm going to get to re-roll once when I make a charge. And then in round 3, I'm going to re-roll hit rolls of 1. So am I trying to set up for a third turn charge so I can do as much attacks as possible between round 3 and round 4? Or is this just something that's nice going to have, so when you're in the heat of the battle, come turn 3, it's going to be there to support you?
Really, you can really build into it, and you can do some pretty nifty stuff, especially like if you want to do some fun stuff, like throw an Avatar of Cain on the table. You can get him moving by himself on turn 2. That's no problem. Or you can get a Cauldron of Blood in a Hagnar list, re-rolling all hits, as well as having the Cauldron activated automatically on turn 2. And then you can just go to town. So you really can build around it, especially for turn 2 combats in Hagnar. That really definitely works. So as long as you're working with the Cauldron. But you need to have that extra prayer to activate, not to activate the Cauldron, to actually give that ability to move forward a turn. But most of the time, it's probably not worth building around, in all honesty.
And the reason I ask that question, and thank you for clarifying that, and the reason I ask is because if I look at the, let's say, for example, the Idoneth Deepkin, the Idoneth Deepkin has almost like a similar kind of, high tide, low tide abilities, except they really built their strategy around it. And you look at someone like Lotan, who can also
more significant too.
Correct. So I guess I wanted to draw the line of the sand and say, are we using the blood rights table the same as an Idoneth Deepkin player could really build their strategy around, like a deep striking eels at turn 2 and turn 4, or
there's the option in Hagnar, because that reroll hit all hits instead of just hit rolls of 1. So that one is quite powerful. You can really build around that. But unless you're doing that, which, I mean, there's just so many other things to build into in Daughters of Khaine. It's not really even worth it. It's a lovely thing to have, but I mean, you never get to turn 5 when you're re-rolling saves of 1 and immune to battle shock. Most of the time, your army's dead anyway. So, in all honesty.
All right. So what I'm hearing, and just to clarify for everyone listening at home, what I'm hearing is that the 6-up additional save to wounds and mortal wounds and the blood rights table is a nice to have, but not necessarily something that you look at to start with and say, right, I'm going to build a strategy around a 6-up after save, or I'm going to build around a blood rights table that is going to try to maximize that turn 3 and turn 4 reroll hit and wound rolls of 1.
Absolutely. So in my case, like, you build into Hagnar, again, it's worth building into, but otherwise, it's just nice to have.
Yeah. But what the strategy that you will build around is going to be the temple. So once you pick the Daughters of Khaine allegiance, you're going to be able to pick a sub-allegiance, or, you pick what's called a temple. So there's things like Drathi Ganeth, there's Hagnar, there is insert name here and insert name here, the Craith, there's also Calibron, and all of these are going to give you additional rules. So I'm imagining that you're going to build a strategy around these instead.
Yeah, absolutely. That's when it gets fun.
Is there any of the 4? Having a bit of a funny. Is there anything that do you build around all 4? Is it just 2 of the 4 that are good? Like, what's your take on the temples?
I mean, all of them can be fun by all means. So, I mean, Chuck would kill me if I said that Craith wasn't good. So, and you've played Chuck, so it's not a bad list to run. It's definitely fun, but 3 out of the 4 I'd say would definitely be worthy of tabletops, that like in a highly competitive game. So, the Craith can be fun, but I wouldn't play it for reliability's sake.
If we were in an elevator and you're going to kind of give me all 4 temples and maybe what build or maybe what the strength would be, like when I look at Hagnar, I instantly think of lots and lots of bodies. That's lots of witch elves and Sisters of Slaughter.
Yeah.
Is that the correct assumption? Like, if I'm going to go down that route, this might be a good build.
Yeah, absolutely. You can quite often see 20 blocks of snakes in there as well, because you're getting the 4-up save from the +1 from the cauldron. Then you get the 5-up, 5-up as well. But mostly, Hagnar is pretty durable. They're a pretty good army for counter-striking as well, I found. So sitting there taking that punch once you've got your buffs up, and then striking back in your hero phase, because you can pile in from the command ability from the cauldron. So that works pretty well. But mostly they're going to be built around either Cauldron Guard or Slaughter Troop. And Slaughter Troop is based around the retreat and charge from the Sisters of Slaughter, and Cauldron Guard just gives you +1 to run and charge with Witch Elves, which gives you a little bit more range. So especially if you add something like Cogs in or something silly.
Yeah. And by the way, when I talk about this, I'm not saying that you can only run Witch Elves or Sisters of Slaughter. It's more that you're probably going to see the greatest reward from that particular build, but not necessarily that's the only way you can do it. Yeah,
absolutely.
When you look at something like Drakey Kenneth, like what's that high level, strength, or maybe the ideal build?
When you get into Drakey Kenneth, you're talking snakes. So the +1 to hit on the mortal wound touch is just lovely. So you throw in the prayer to give them extra hits on 6s, and their touches going off on 3s, re-rolling 1s, extra mortal wounds on 6s. On a unit of 10, you're looking to get out around about like 10 mortal wounds pretty consistently. So them, you could really get, if you'd made one small change to Daughters of Khaine, you could really get a decent Temple Nest list in Drakey Kenneth as well. If Morathi could make Snake's Battle Line and not have to have those extra Witch Elves in there as well, you could really make a decent Temple Nest list, because the snakes, and especially the shooty ones, are pointed as if they're going to be shooting twice each phase, once in the hero phase and once in the combat phase, because Morathi's combat command ability, allows that. So they're kind of pointed as such. And if you chucked them in, and if Morathi made them battle line the melee snakes, you can actually make some pretty fun lists in there. But at the moment, the point cost is just too high. So
yeah, I've heard a few complaints in the past having to take the Medusa as the general.
Yes, that's the problem.
It does kind of pull that list build back.
Because you really want to be utilizing that command ability from Morathi, because she's the only one that allows 2 units to pile in an attack, or ranged units to shoot in the hero phase as well, which is really good. And you just never see it used. I mean, I've been inclined to take Morathi as my general, and the only one you can really do it in is Drakey Kenneth. I suppose you could do it in Calibron, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's just such a waste. I'd love to run a Temple Nest list. I really would.
I mean, we are recording now on the 1st of May, so we don't know in the General's Handbook. We might see some changes. Who knows? We might get a new addition to Sisters of Battle. Let's see where I'm at. Sisters of Slaughter got me to Sisters of Battle. To the Daughters of Khaine.
That'll do.
You never know what's coming, right? We've got Techless coming. We've got Slanted.
So especially with the Warcry Warband and the
Underworld
as well, So, and it'll be a perfect time. I mean, there's 4 books next in line, I think. What are we? We've got Nighthaunt, Daughters of Khaine, Ideneth, and
Legions.
Legions, yes.
Yeah. And Nurgle's a bit old as well, but we won't go.
Don't worry about Nurgle. They're fine.
Look, if nothing more, we might see an update in the General's Handbook. But what I'm hearing right now is that having to take Morathi as the general is a little bit restrictive on that snake build.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's mainly where I see Drakey Kenneth's strength is really in the snakes. So that +1 to hit is just so powerful. I mean, getting Witch Elves to the 2+ re-rolling ones to hit, that's nice, but they're already so accurate. They already do so much work. I mean, a unit of 20 Witch Elves, normally I'm overkilling something by 10 to 20 wounds anyway, in reality.
You're just throwing an absolute horde of dice with those Witch Elves, which is why they've been such a strong build for a long time. That, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've actually got to play something like a Petrifex Elite at the moment.
Oh, well, my mate actually runs Petrifex, so yeah, he's just in the room over. So it's actually really not too bad as Daughters of Khaine, because especially with Morathi, you can take out the Hecatos. Yeah. And as long as you target the Harvester before you actually take out the Hecatos, because obviously they can cycle back the Hecatos, and if you kill just a normal trooper, you can just bring back Hecatos if the Gothizzar Harvester's there. So as long as you take out the Harvester, then Morathi does her 6-inch stare to take out a individual model. It's fine. Bob's your uncle. They got no more re-rolling, and yeah, you just wipe them out. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, and plus the pure weight of dice should be able to get through, although they might have a 3-up armor save. The pure weight of dice should be able to.
Before I kind of figured out that mechanic as well, you just play keep away. Like really, there's no point. They generally will. They'll be split up into 2 or 3 main blocks, and playing in the style that I play as well. I just play keep away. So you just steal an objective when they come and get it. Just steal the other one. So. Yeah. They're so slow compared to Daughters of Khaine that with harpies moving 20 inches at a time, it's just no competition in terms of stealing objectives, especially if you're in a scenario with like 4 or 5 objectives. And yeah, Bob's your uncle. Throw Morathi into one, crush one blob, and then tackle the other with some harassing harpies or something. So, yeah,
I like it. Look at you cracking the code when it comes to OBR.
Yeah.
Let's close out the final 2 temples. You've got the Craith. Now, the Craith looks like we're fishing for those that double pile in on a 6.
So you're going heavily into MSU with the Craith, so you want as many small units as you can to try and activate that. And the problem with that is you've got like the fight. You fight, then they fight, obviously. So you're going to lose a couple of units in that. It can be a lot of fun. It's just not reliable. If there was a trait or something that could move that to a 5, yeah, for sure, I'd think about that. That'd be lovely.
Yeah. Or even like I look at Hammerhall in the Cities of Sigmar. It's a command point, and I can double pile in. But what's the true benefit of a multiple small unit double piling in?
Yeah, that's kind of the same as with Nightborn, isn't it? So, but excuse me.
And then finally we've got Calibron.
My baby. Yeah, I've played Calibron I probably played Hagnar, for shits and giggles for about 6 months when the book came out. And then I said, no more of this. I was just crushing my local opponent's souls. So on to Calibron we went, and it's been happy days ever since. It's a lot of fun to play. It's a really free play style. You're not stuck in a constricted ball around your cauldron, like trying to get those buffs. So with Calibron, you get a teleport within 7 inches of the general. So you can't be in combat during that. So sorry.
I was going to say that's not a command. That's not a command point. That's just a trait. That's just like
that's a command.
It's automatic once a round.
Yeah. Once at the start of the hero phase. So it's a little annoying because it's at the start of the hero phase, so you can't buff something up with Witch Brew or a spell and then send them off. So if you do send them off, things tend to be a little bit vulnerable and not do a great deal of damage, especially because you don't have a huge amount of reliable pluses to charge. You've got Cauldron Guard, which is +1 to charge, which is okay, but coming out from 9 inches out, it's just not super reliable, especially if you don't have a hero over there to get the reroll. But
perfect for snaking a late game objective.
Yes,
which absolutely. Is how it reminds me of the Hand of Gork spell in my glimpse fight. It's like literally I hold back, because I don't want to kind of show my opponent what I want to do, and then kind of turn 4, turn 5, when we're in the heat of the moment, there's damage being done. I can teleport onto an objective, score late, or they're always worried that I'm going to do that, so they're not fully committing to the battle.
Yeah, well, and especially if you've got Morathi in the list, a lot of people think you're going to teleport Morathi over at the start of the hero phase, then transform her so she's 8 inches out instead of 9. And then go for the charge. And having that threat is lovely because sometimes you will if they've left something exposed, but most of the time that's just there for the threat. Most of the time you just don't teleport Morathi because you stick her in a blob in your deployment zone with a nice screen in front of her, and then back her with enough Witch Elves so that she pops out at the front when you transform her. She can move 14 anyway. She's moved a total of about 20 inches by that stage. She's in the deployment zone pretty much of the enemy anyway. So,
yeah, I think that was my very first experience with Daughters of Khaine. A guy called Rob Reimers had done that trick, and I like never again. That's not happening to me.
And unfortunately, I did catch a few people out at CanCon with that weren't aware that could happen. I did mention that Marathi can transform and stuff, and they just didn't click that, you can move again afterwards as well, that whole 14 inches, and you're just up in people's grill. And that's lovely for locking stuff down. But generally what I'll use the Calibron teleport for is catching up. So your battle line units like your Sisters of Slaughter and your Witch Elves are just so fast. And the thing with Hagnar is you've got to keep them in that zone to keep the extra DPR save. And you have to kind of use the tails to kind of snake back and make sure you secure that buff. But in Calibron, you just send them out and you don't have to have as large a unit. So I run 20 blocks instead of 30s because I don't need to snake the tail out. And then next turn, you can just teleport one of your heroes to give them the buff next turn. So if you've got enough range, you can just sneak a Hag Queen out over to catch up to your unit. And that way you don't have to have your heroes exposed either. You can keep your heroes a little back and, have them playing a little defensive. So make sure you're keeping them out of that 18-inch spellcast range or the 24-inch shots that you got coming in for your opponent. So it just allows you to play a little bit more cagey with your heroes. And it means that you can go all out with your some of your units as well. And it really makes redeploying something like a screen, or if you've got a split deployment zone, for instance, where one of the scenarios we've got, you have to deploy on each corner. I don't recall the one. But if you've got something way out of place and you're like, oh, crap, just didn't have room to place this, and you can just redeploy. It just allows some really sneaky stuff. It's really fun.
I love it. Christine in the chat's asked around Calibron with Slaughter Troop. What's your thoughts on that? Is it viable?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, most of the time, if you're running Slaughter Troop, you've got such good movement that you don't really need Calibron. If you're talking about redeploying heroes to get them in place to rebuff up your units' assisters, yeah, absolutely, that could work. So yeah, that could definitely have some legs. So I kind of use I use the 30 block Sisters of Slaughter myself because they do have that capacity to retreat and then pile in that 6 even without the charge. And I don't generally use the Sisters as a hammer though, because they do have less attacks than the Witch Elves. They're generally a unit I use either defensively or for stealing objectives and just having them as numbers. So yes and no. No straight answer really, but absolutely.
And I think the great thing about Daughters of Khaine is that you could almost take any unit and put them in any temple, and it would work in some capacity. It's not like if you take the Life Takers in a Calibron list, it's like, oh, it's not really good. It kind of like work.
Hey, I did that. Yeah, watch out. Watch your mouth. I did that.
I was just making something up completely on the fly. I don't even know if it works or not, but it was just like I could put, I don't know, like Medusa in a Medusa and a Kraith. I don't know, man. I'm not Daughters of Khaine player. This is why you're the expert.
And you've got the -1 to hit as well from the ranged, which actually worked out really well. 3 out of my 6 games at CanCon were against ranged armies. So the one loss I took at the start to my cousins, what was it, Tempest Eye list, that was painful. I had to change my list just because I versed him. I didn't have a CP at the start and just got my ass handed to me in the first round when he alpha striked me.
And just to acknowledge something, Luigi in the chat's just asked around the buffing of a unit that's been teleported. You absolutely can buff a unit that's been teleported. It's just that you need to consider your buff ranges. So what you can't do is buff and then send them off. The teleport happens at the start of the hero phase. So if you throw them literally 30 inches up the board, you better have a hero 30 inches up the board to be able to apply a buff. That's what we're referring to. Is that right, Dayne? Yeah, absolutely. So, and there, like, you've got Mind Razor, which can still reach 18 inches, or if you've got a Balewind 24 and whatnot. But generally, you're not using it to, you're using it to outmaneuver someone or redeploy, as opposed to using it with a hammer unit. So, because those buffs just, when you're getting somewhere on the backboard and you're teleporting way out of the way,
your 3-inch witchbrew is not going to reach.
Yeah. Well, with my Gloom Spike Hits, for example, the Hand of Gork is a spell that I can do anytime in the hero phase. So I could buff up a bunch of Grots.
Yes,
I could,
please.
I could do things like, the Fanatics that give them +1 attack because it's a hero phase, and then fling them up the board.
Oh,
but
that would be fantastic.
But because it says for you guys that it happens at the start, that would be the first thing you've got to do before any spells, any ability buffs. So that's just the consideration we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there are some standout units when it comes to charging, like Morathi. So, because she can get that extra inch when she transforms after, like I said. But yeah, not a fan.
That's all right, and people might have their own list tech here, but it's just something to consider and keep in mind when you're building a list. Which is a perfect time to talk about list. Now, this is your, I almost said award-winning, because, to go 16th at a tournament of over 200 players with Daughters of Khaine, the only Daughters of Khaine army at CanCon, is truly a remarkable performance. And it wasn't even Hagnar. If anyone's thinking it's going to be anything, it's going to be Hagnar, and you did it with Calibron. So what I'm going to do is I want to talk through your list. I want to hear how you kind of put it all together, why you made the spell choice that you made, or the command ability, or like whatever you did that made this list work. And if someone was thinking of something different, are there alternatives of, I see heart renders. Do we take a double life takers? So first things first, you've taken the realm of Ulgu with the Temple of Calibron. Why Ulgu? Why Calibron?
Ulgu is just purely fluff. I'm pretty sure it didn't affect any of my item choices or anything. So I didn't have a battalion, so there's only one artifact, which is coming straight from the lore anyway. Calibron, I was anticipating a fair bit of shooting. The meta was in such a strange place coming up to CanCon, especially because it was pretty much like the Wild Wild West with Zeech coming out without a FAQ as well.
We had just seen Cities of Sigmar had really just done really well at Blood and Glory, and they started bringing like the Iron Drake and the all the shooting to the table.
And one of my mates was bringing a gunline list as well, so I was just totally paranoid about people, shoot the hero. So I took Calibron for the neg one, and it's what I'm comfortable with. I've been playing it for close to 2 years now, and we had quite a few objectives as well where outmaneuvering was pretty important. So having that teleport was just fantastic.
By the way, Dayne, you had mentioned narratively around Ulgu. Your narrative. So when we talked about like your temple, your altar, the Cauldron of Blood. Yeah, your Cauldron of Blood. That's actually on a Terrorgeist. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, it was just a bit of fun. It's just whack this on a monster, but I ended up thinking about it and going, turn them into dragon hunters more or less. So their Terrorgeist come from the realm of Ulgu. When they die, Nagash claims them back. So they were pretty cranky at Nagash, especially because he turned down Morathi's advances. So we went to steal back all the Terrorgeists and chuck them on the Cauldron, because the Cauldron can't move. It's got no motor. It's just a bunch of wheels powered by the power of blood, ? I didn't really understand the lore behind the Cauldron, so I just stuck it on a dragon. That way it can move at least. And I was running it with a Thermal Rider Cloak as well, so because its movement, it's only 6. It's not the fastest thing in the world.
All right, well, let's get into your list. I do love your narrative, and Morathi did hit onto Nagash true story. Go read about the time that we had all the gods in the Pantheon. But we'll start off with Morathi. So why did you take Morathi? I noticed she's not your general, and she's taken the Lore of Shadows, Shroud of Despair. So talk me through Morathi, talking about that choice. Talk to me about that spell. Why isn't she the general?
She's not the general because she's not in Drake Chicken. So even if I was to take her as the general, it would make me lose the Calibron command trait, which allows for the teleport. So if I was taking her in Drake, absolutely. The spell, Shroud of Despair, it's just a neg debuff to bravery. There's a lot of bravery 7 and 8 around there, especially with Cities of Sigmar and stuff coming out recently, or at the time. So it's just to hopefully get that extra bit of bravery off so I can mind razor things, which is bravery dependent. And Morathi is just such a nice piece to use in battle. She really allows you to control the combat phase, so you can lock things down because she can only take 3 wounds a turn. That includes your turn and your opponent's turn in the combat phase, so she can die over 2 whole rounds.
Unless she's taking wounds to endless spells in between rounds.
Absolutely, and not a great deal of lists for taking those kind of endless spells, I found at the time. So I was pretty confident with her. If she gets hit by Aether Void Pendulum, that sucks, and she would pretty much just fall over. But no, she's just a control piece at the end of the day. She can be used to take some stuff out, and she is pretty wacky when you really buff her up nicely. But she's more to lock down the opponent in the first turn, really allow me to dictate the combat phase, and just control their movement. That's really what she's there for. So she's not really there to kill stuff. She's just there to control.
And in a hero scenario where you want the hero to sit on the objective or to claim an objective, Morathi is probably pound for pound one of the best to take and retain an objective.
And her spell just on a war scroll as well, Anzapol's Black Horror, that's fantastic. I mean, you've got to roll, it's D6 mortal wounds on a 4-up, I believe, and then D3 on a 2 to 3, and then 1 mortal wound on a 1. It's cast on a 7, 18 or 36-inch range with her range, and you can just pop off heroes if you manage to get lucky, and which you do quite often. It's actually quite surprising. So yeah, people don't like that at all because you can just sit out of unbinding range, except if you're playing Seraphon, of course. But yeah, it's a lovely little thing to have.
Yeah. Before I talk about the Blood Rack Medusa, I might just ask you one more question about Morathi. In the average game, and I appreciate that every battle's different, every scenario is different, every opponent's different. But in the average game, do you teleport Morathi early, late?
Nope.
Do you wait for her to take the damage? Like, what's your strategy? What's your thinking with Morathi?
I almost never teleport Morathi, to be quite honest. Most people expect you to, and they'll cover their backlines pretty well, especially if you're playing a relatively competitive game. People will screen off pretty well. So I'm not really inclined to do that. So Morathi's she can most often get into place, honestly, if she just transforms from the front lines and you encircle her, because you can control where she transforms and comes down, and you've got that 14-inch move afterwards. You can get her so far. It's ridiculous.
Do you transform her immediately, or do you wait till she takes the wounds? Like, what's your strategy there?
That depends on the opponent. If you want to make use of spellcasting, I'd probably rip her more on first and second turn than later. Probably first turn, probably 60 to 70% of the games.
Yeah.
So especially if you've got up against a combat army and you really just need to lock something down.
Because some people might, with such a big model who's worth a lot of points, they may not know when is a right time to transform her. They might try to hold off. They might do it too early. So it's good to hear,
She's pretty safe in Calibron, because if you've got her behind a row of troops getting lookouts, in Calibron, she's -3 to hit in shooting. So you're not too concerned about shooting, but it's the mortal wounds, because the wounds taken obviously double when she transforms, and that that really hurts. So I just like to get the full amount of turns out of her I can, really, and just really try and control the movement.
Yeah, and we can't heal her as well, so definitely getting the most out of that.
Yeah, which would be broken as hell.
Yeah. So the next up, you've got the Blood Rack Medusa, who is your general, has the ability, the command trait, the Mistress of Illusion, has the artifact Shadow Stone, and then the spell Mind Razor. So that Mind Razor is certainly a staple in the army. Again, why did you choose what you chose? Why is this the general? Talk to me about this model.
Yep. Well, the Blood Rack's got 1 extra wound. She's 6 wounds as opposed to 5, which your normal foot troops are. So that's just an easy choice for the general instead of one of the Hag Queens. And I need to utilize the command trait, so Morathi can't be the general. So that's why she's the general. The command trait's just the Calibron command trait. It's bloody lovely. The Shadow Stone is +1 to cast and re-roll casting rolls of 1, which is just incredible if you're looking for reliability. And that Mind Razor, you really want that Mind Razor going off every turn if you can. It's neg1 to rend and +1 to damage if your bravery's higher than that. You're not so concerned about the double damage because you're doing a lot of damage as it is, but it's that rend you're really looking for, because in a heavy foot troop, kind of Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter, you have very little rend. So yeah, it's just to give you that punch.
Yeah, because you've got the weight of attacks, but you don't have the rend to match. You add the rend to that, because I know when I play Liam, our Shadowhammer friend, that Mind Razor is the single spell that I always want to stop, because again, the weight of dice with the damage output of with the rend, it will just collapse Phoenix Guard. Will collapse your Petrifix Elite Mortec Guard. It'll just the pure dice rolls.
One of the really cheeky things you can do as well, if you really need to get that spell off, you can teleport the Bloodrack Medusa outside of your opponent's casting range in the third turn, let's say, so that your unit's in range of your buff, but your opponent's not in range to dispel. So, because the Bloodrack's always obviously in range of herself to teleport, as long as she's not in combat, she can just pop off and you can't contest that spell. That's a really nice use.
You've got 2 Hag Queens. You've got one with the Catechism of Murder. The other one is the Catechism of Murder, and the Martyr Sacrifice. Don't say that 3 times. Again, why do we have 2 Hag Queens? Why have you taken 2 different spells? Some people take redundancy. Why have you gone 2 different ones? And what are they doing for your army?
Well, the Hag Queens obviously give Witch Brew, which it makes you immune to battle shock and gives you re-rolling wound rolls, all wound rolls. I think it's failed wound rolls off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that. But they're bloody fantastic, especially for their price. You get a lot of people still complaining about them. And having 1's lovely, but having 2 is just better. It enables you to have 2 units attacking at once. And not have to worry about battle shock, and you've got the nice buffs on them, so you've got 2 hammers working instead of just 1. So you do want some kind of reliability and what was the word you used? It is nice to have 2 in case one dies. But
redundancy.
Redundancy. There you go. Sorry, that hit me for 6. And then Catechism is extra attacks on 6s to hit, so you generate 2 attacks, which is lovely, especially if you throw in 120 dice from Witch Elves or something. And then you've got Martyr Sacrifice, which is one of my favorites. It each time a model dies on a 5 or 6, it reflects a mortal wound to the opponent. And if you've got something like Sisters of Slaughter with bucklers already, which reflect mortal wounds on saves of 6, unmodified, so even if they outrend you, you still get to do that. It can double up, and you can take out some pretty hefty stuff. So just by dying, it's one of the solid counters to thing like a Terrorgeist. So you just throw some Sisters into it, he'll kill himself, that's fine. But yeah.
So with the combination, just to clarify, so I'm casting the Martyr Sacrifice. I've got my Sisters of Slaughter, who mortal on a save roll of 6 bounce off a mortal wound. And then if they die on a 5 or a 6, they're also bouncing another mortal wound.
Absolutely.
So the sheer mortal wound output from a block of Sisters of Slaughter could be brutal.
Yeah. So, and if you take all the mortal wounds to the face and all 30, let's say a Terrorgeist comes at you, rolls 24 mortal wounds, 24 deaths, that's... what, 4? That's 8 mortal wounds reflected on average. That's not too bad. So, and with the shield save,
put it on its third behemoth profile.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's just a nice little punch in the face back. So it makes a lot of people hesitant to attack your things as well, especially if you say, yeah, I've got 2 ways of generating mortal wounds on this unit if you kill them. So it just makes people think twice about it.
Would make me second guess my heroes as well, especially like some of those lower wound heroes. You could pop it. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Quite nice.
Next up, you've got 2 units of Witch Elves. One have the pair of sacrificial knives. The other one has the sacrificial knives and the blade bucklers. Again, the question is, why do you have a unit of 20 over 30, or why did you go that way? And then why would you take one with blade bucklers versus the pair?
Yep. Yeah, well, the units are 20 instead of 30. With Calibron, again, you don't really need to have those tails lining back to your cauldron because you don't run a cauldron. So you're not necessarily really worried about staying within any buff ranges because you've already got all the buffs you need in Witchbrew and Catechism. So you're throwing them forward and just trying to get as many in range. And there's just no need to have that extra 10. 20, you're doing all the work you need, in all honesty. And you kind of need the points elsewhere. And the double knives, that's the hammer. You want to throw that into something where you need all those attacks because they get the extra attack. And the bucklers, again, in combination with Martyr's Sacrifice, can really give a nice slap in the face to something if they attack you.
So it's so does the Witch Elves and the Sisters of Slaughter do the mortal wounds, or is it just on the Sisters of Slaughter?
With the buckler. So and the bucklers do give +1 to armor save in melee combat as well, which is nice. But I mean, a 5 is still a 5. So
yeah, which is why the Hagnar additional after save makes that unit more durable.
Absolutely.
But when you're flooding the board with
cauldron, if you got them in range of a cauldron, they're saving on 4s, which is lovely. And then with the after save, a Hagnar, a 5, and a 5, and that's lovely. But yeah, I don't have a cauldron. No. So yeah, the just aren't worth it in the unit with the hammer and with all of them. So it's nice to have one unit with a big block with the double knives, and then having the 2 with they're mostly for mortal wound output, because as you can see, I don't have a great deal in this list.
Next up, you've got the 30 Sisters of Slaughter. So what do Sisters of Slaughter bring to the table that another unit of Witch Elves wouldn't?
Well, obviously the 6-inch pile in. So they can activate to pile in from from inside 6 inches instead of 3. And we had to actually get that clarified. My opponent didn't believe me at CanCon, which was fine. No hassle at all. But yeah, it's just a mechanic you don't encounter very often. So Yetis have it as well, I think.
Your Bloodthirster of Incessant Rage does.
Yep.
There's obviously a couple of artifacts.
Like 8. Korgos Cool has 8, which is just ridiculous.
But there's not a lot of units that let you pile in 6. Like it's usually for a character.
Yeah, and you can also retreat before doing that as well. So it allows for some really sneaky objective taking. So you can attack one unit one turn, then next turn retreat with a run roll, and then charge in, pile in 6 inches into another enemy unit and attack. And if you're coming up against something like a Keeper of Secrets, you can do that at the end of the phase so that Locust doesn't matter. And you're obviously outside of 6 as well, so they can't actually hit you with Locust. So, well, you inside 6, but you're not within range of them to pile in because they're not within 3. So you can wait until the end.
So why is the 6-inch pile in important to you? Is it so you can get more models in range of the enemy? Is it you get better choice selection on where you go? Why is that important to you?
A lot of the time, it allows you to string out and get those extra bodies in range for the objective. And other times, like I said, against Keeper of Secrets, allowing you to control that combat phase and the activation, like the series of activations. But yeah, most of the time, it's just to get extra bodies in range of the objective. So, and they do have a 2-inch reach on their whips as well. So with that 6 inches, you can reach up to 8 inches. So if you're trying to reach something nice and deep, and you manage to clear a screen with another unit, you can pile them in those 6 inches and they got the 2-inch extra reach. You can hit some stuff pretty deep in their lines.
Yeah, that's great. Next up, you have a unit of 10 Khaine Life Takers. So what are the Life Takers? Why are you taking them?
The Life Takers are the melee variant of the Khaine. They're a requirement for Cauldron Guard. So some people take them in 5s in Cauldron Guard. I used to do that, but I used to run them in 10s instead, which was fun. But they're very fast. They move 14. They come in units of 5, and they hit like a Mack truck. So especially if you get the right buffs on them, they have 2 attacks each, hitting on 3s and 4s. 1 damage, but if they charge, it goes up to 2 damage. And then if your bravery outweighs your enemy, and you've got Mind Razor on them, they're going up to -1 rend and 3 damage per hit. So a unit of 10, if you're looking to whack something real big, you can pop out 20 attacks at 3s, re-rolling 1s if you're in the 3rd battle round, and then wounding on 4s, re-rolling all. -1, 3 damage. That's, yeah, a lot of damage.
And both your Khaine units start on the side of the board, so they don't have to be deployed normally.
Yeah, so generally you can deploy them off the board. I like to deploy the Life Takers surrounding Morathi and near a hag, because they can move 14 if you're taking second turn, or if your opponent gives you second turn for some strange reason. The Harpies being able to fly over your screens and really give something a good whack, and then potentially retreat after as well on a 4+. It's just fantastic. So I said earlier, I had a unit of 10 Life Takers, which are 160 points, take out a 480 point unit of Gluttons. So if you get them buffed up and you're near Inspiring to get that extra bravery with the Mind Razor, those 3 damage hits at -1 just so painful.
So you could charge in, do massive damage, roll a 4+, choose to then retreat, maybe retreat onto an objective, retreat into somewhere else. Do you have to be, and there's no restrictions that you have to be outside of 3 inches of an enemy, so you could
I do believe you do have to be outside of 3 to successfully retreat, though. Otherwise you can't finish that move. But they are really good, especially if you want to retreat them and use them as a screen instead. That's often what I do.
Okay. But either way, like, it's pretty cool that you're able to get yourself out of combat after you've done a hit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's grouse. So I'd really love to see a command ability or a trait or a temple around giving that +1, that ability, like working on a 3+ instead of a 4. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love Khaine. They're what got me into the army, and everyone said Life Takers sucked except Tom Lyons. And I was using them at the time, and I was like, yep, you're not wrong. Had a bit of a chat to him about them, and had a chat to Vince about them as well, and they're just fantastic. So they're really good at what they do.
And I wanted to spend a bit of time on the Life Takers, because most people go the other way, which I know you've got 5 heart renders there, but people almost always go for the heart renders because they're more of the shooting guys, and they're also then they kind of retreat away. While the combat-y ones, people kind of don't really go that route.
Yeah, and they can be used in multiple facets as well. You're not always just using them to whack stuff. They make a really big screen because they're on the 40mm bases. You string them out an inch apart and they're enormous. And they also have the shields that reflect mortal wounds. And if you pop Martyr Sacrifice on them, you're not doing, you're doing a couple of mortal wounds, which is helpful. And like I said, they move 14, so you give them an auto 6 run, they're moving 20, they can just steal objectives. They're so fast.
So then you got your heart takers, so your heart renders. Why are they in the army? What's their role?
Oh, their role's purely just to snake objectives. So because they have the extra move after they shoot, they can get closer to objectives, and if they've got 1 or 2 models on there, you can just outweigh them quite easily with the 5 models. So, and I'm not a huge fan of the playstyle of them. They're quite nice. It's nice to have a unit of them. But yeah, they're just kind of in there just to steal objectives. So they're not really hitting anything.
The last unit you've got are allies from the cities of Sigmar, which is your Shadow Warriors. So I guess a couple of questions is, why Shadow Warriors? Why wouldn't you just take another unit of Life Takers or Heart Renders? Because, I mean, they do essentially the same thing, right? They come down, they come in from a teleport, they're going to shoot, they're going to do some combat. So why Shadow Warriors? What role do they play in your army?
Essentially, I was just looking for a screen. Because Witch Elves and most of your other units are so fast, it's hard to get a screen that keeps up with them. And although it is nice, you could easily just pop a Witch Elves in front, unit of 10, and run those forward instead. But that extra inch sometimes can be quite valuable. And these guys can actually deep strike, coming from off the board, obviously. So you can pop them anywhere instead of being reliant on that run roll to get your screen out quite far. And they can also start contributing damage, quite early on as well, especially if you bring them out on terrain. So because they get that +1 to hit and wound if they're wholly within terrain. So they're hitting on 2s and 3s if they have that. And if Morathi gets a mortal wound or 2 off onto a hero early on, you can just use them to kind of pop off those last few wounds. And there's not a great deal of ranged within Daughters of Khaine, and I just felt that need for a couple more shots just to be able to take off those key heroes. And otherwise, it's a great screen. Deep striking screens are fantastic. They're so underrated because you can put them anywhere. So you don't need to be reliant.
And they hit like a truck, especially if you put them in cover. Hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, rend 1. They are a good unit for 100 points. One thing I know.
One thing I've been tempted to play around with as well is the Withering, which is +1 to wound against a unit. So the Shadow Warriors would benefit from that as well because it's attacks going into a unit. It's not specified that it has to be a Daughters of Khaine unit. So you could have them on 2s, re-rolling 1s and then 2s. So that would be fun.
One thing that I'm noticing and the chat's noticing as well is you don't really have a lot of command points.
No.
And this is the type of army that could really benefit from having a lot of command points, whether it's rerolling 1s to save, rerolling 1s to hit, rerolling charges, and then Battle Shock comes into play as well. So how do you kind of work with the limitations on your command points? Especially like going into double turns as well. Like it's not like you have a lot up your sleeve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I don't have a cauldron to use a command ability to double pile in, there's not a great deal of command abilities I am using it, except for the reroll charging. And usually I'm in combat about round 2 and 3, so most of the time I have reroll 1s to hit. So I'm not generally using it on that. It's mostly to auto 6 and there's charges early on in turn 1 and 2. So I don't find a huge need for them, although it did bite me in the arse on my first game at CanCon. My cousin realized I had no CP. He was Tempest Eye. He was very fast and very shooty. So he spread his attacks across all my single models, triggered Battle Shock in every one of my units of infantry. And I think I had about like 23 Witch Elves left by the end of turn 1. They just all ran to Battle Shock. So that was a key flaw in my list, and that has been changed. So I do have a CP in my list now just because of that, because, you can just Battle Shock stuff off otherwise. So you can generally do with just 1 CP a turn otherwise. So other than that, but you do need 1 for that Battle Shock. So that was just crippling. So that was the only game I lost at CanCon to my cousin because we grudged. And it came down to a last turn. I teleported Morathi with Miracle and tried to steal an objective off him. If I rolled the 9+ charge, I would have won. I didn't. He won. Yeah, it's a great game.
That's all you can ask for. Win, lose, or draw, great game.
Yeah.
So how does your list change now that we've had Tzeentch, we've had Seraphon, we've had Wrath of the Everchosen? Obviously, there's stuff to come, but we've had 3 battle tomes released since CanCon, which was only a few months ago. How does your list, or at least the thinking of Daughters of Khaine, to handle big blocks of the change host or Lord Crowe kind of nerfing spells all over the board?
Yeah, Seraphon and Tzeentch present pretty unique problems in that they're similar-ish playstyles to you in that they're incredibly high movement, especially just because of the teleports predominantly. I don't know how to handle Seraphon yet, and my roommate has just got some flamers as well for his Tzeentch army. I am terrified of those.
So you can almost guarantee you're not getting Mind Razor off if your opponent doesn't want it to go off.
There are some tricky things you can do, like teleporting your unit out of range if you're against Tzeentch, but Seraphon, you can't do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, against the change host with, your pink horrors, you've got the attacks to be able to delete the pink horrors, the blue horrors, and the brimstones.
And I played a game against Tzeentch, one of my roommates, Tzeentch, about 3 weeks ago. He was running 4 blocks of pinks. And you can chew through them pretty damn easily. That's not a huge problem. But when you've got 1 line of pinks in front of another line of pinks, and you've got 2 screens of pinks, that's a lot of pinks. that's just when it gets ridiculous. So you can, if you have a cauldron and you can double pile in, where you can pile in the hero phase in your next turn and you manage to get a double turn, you can just chew through them like nothing else, and that's not a huge problem. And especially not being able to retreat away from pink horrors is not a huge issue because you kind of just want to kill them anyway. But most of the time they can just stay out of range if they want to and teleport to you with their flamers or their salamanders and punch you in the dick whenever they want, really. So that presents a unique problem that you just, if they don't want you to get to them, you're not gonna.
I imagine Morathi would be great against the salamanders and the flamers because she's only able to take three damage a turn, and Morathi, being a monster, probably has a really good shot of taking down the 3 salamanders through the gaze, through her combat, and vice versa with the flamers, because the flamers are truly a glass hammer, but it's getting to that glass hammer and accepting the damage first.
Yeah, you have to weather those shots first, and if they're taking first turn and you don't have any buffs up, especially on your witch elves, and they trigger those battle shocks against all 3 units, you're in big trouble. And they can just put out so much damage, especially the buffs on skinks putting out those mortal wounds on your hag queens, because the -1 to hit in Calibron won't do a great deal against that, really, because you're just looking for the mortal wounds at the end of the day. And they put out quite a few bloody attacks too.
Maybe we're back to Hagnar.
Yeah, well, I'm yet to find the answers for those two, but things like Slaves to Darkness and stuff, I've switched out 20 Witch Elves for 10 Snakes. I've had to change, take out 5 Life Takers as well, and pop in 3 Aether Wings. So just for the extra screen. The 5 Life Takers are still good. They don't do, obviously halves their damage output. They can still get a max damage output of 30 if, in a perfect world. But yeah, having that extra screen from the Aether Wings is really nice, and the mortal wounds from the snakes is just lovely. So you really need them in this kind of meta at the moment, I think, especially when you're up against things like slaves and OBR and stuff like that. But yeah, Siege and Seraphon though, no clue.
No, I think based on what I've seen, because I've been playing a lot of Tabletop Simulator, I've been watching it. I got to play a tournament in March, literally the week before lockdown happened in Australia. I think you've got the tools. I think Morathi is a great resource. I think the teleporting is a great resource. The things like the Canary, being able to, because getting Croque is the key in the Seraphon. If you're playing against a Starborn, a Canary is not going to take down Croque, but it's a start of a threat, and then through the other resources you can kind of start bringing them down. I just know you're not going to have Mind Razor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just haven't had a chance to get that many games in against Seraphon as well. We've got a local player here that plays them. I took Slanesh against him in the last local tournament. He absolutely whooped my ass. So yeah. Most
people haven't, man. Like lockdown happened just right after the FAQ. So, but based on my experience and what I can see, you have the tools to be able to handle it. So, what I want to know,
get some more games in.
Of course, you get your rep, you'll learn a lesson, you'll build around it. How do you win? How does Daughters of Khaine generally win on the table?
It can change. So it's not always the same thing. Most people just say push stuff forward. Yeah, that's your answer, push stuff forward. But no, it's down to movement. Daughters of Khaine play a movement game. They control the combat phase. And they're really good with Morathi, obviously, locking stuff down. And me playing Calibron with the Shadow Warriors, the Life Takers, and just so much movement, a lot of the time you're either playing keep away or kill it. So if you can kill it, you'll generally just obliterate it. But if it's too high armor and it's slow, you just run away and play keep away. So it's mainly just a movement game. And if you're not playing movement game, you're just killing them. So just push it forward is the answer. But, no.
Yes, push it forward, but you've got things like the Canary that let you challenge. And even if you just had the Canary on the side, and I've seen Daughters of Khaine players just keep that unit of Canary waiting for that last that opportunity to seize an objective, or even just to kind of put doubt in their opponent's mind. For 80 to 90 points, that's great value.
Absolutely. You can challenge one objective, and hopefully cause them to, come over and support it. And then, you can just snake down and steal those objectives. But mainly you're just, moving around, deep striking. Morathi can be really useful in breaking screens and stuff as well, and breaking coherency, especially if you need to get a few more models in range. But lots of movement. Movement is the aim of the game with Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, they definitely play to the strengths of the game, especially if you're building around the Witch Elves, because then you're taking up board space as well as having high movement.
Yeah. So having I had 1 teleport and 3 deep strikes. So there's a lot of movement in my list.
What's going to stop you from winning? So when you and I are on the table, what are your biggest concerns? Again, obviously missions are different and armies are different, but what are the things that are going to most likely to stop you from winning a game?
If my opponent's got a larger threat range than me, if you're able to take out my screens from a distance, change host. A lot of things that can whack harder than me. Big War terrifies me because they're so hard hitters and they're so fast. So anything that can take out my screens and give me a good thump before I can get to you.
Something like the Iron Jaws as well as the Ogre Maw tribes, they can turn 1 charge you. You could get smashed in the face by 2, 3 Stonehorns or 2 Maw Crushers. Is that a concern? Because you want your buffs on, a turn 1 charge, you're not going to be able to get a whole bunch of your buffs. Yeah,
absolutely. If you deploy badly, absolutely people are going to take advantage of that. I mean, I'm not too concerned about the Thunder Tusks and stuff. The Cabbages, however, yes. So having them double activate and stuff, and not a huge fan. So if they just wipe out my screen with their mortal wounds and then just keep carrying on, that is genuinely terrifying. So,
what about something like a Cities of Sigmar who might be able to take off your Hag Queens? Because this was a strategy early on where people are like, take the Hag Queen, take the Hag Queen, take the Hag Queen.
Yeah, and that
is that still a concern?
Absolutely, that's pretty much what's made me take Calibron. So because having Calibron and that teleport, you can just keep your general in the back and just move your hags where you need them when you need them and not have them overexposed. So that's generally my answer to that. So just
keeping them close, you're going to get the lookout serve -1 to hit, but it's when the mortal wounds start coming in that you're going to pop them like it's hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And having them in Hagnar and stuff, you're not so concerned because you can just stay in range of the 5-up mortal wound save. Yeah. That's lovely. But most of the time, just hide behind a tree. You'll be fine.
Because it is one of those books, because it's an older style book, they haven't been pinged with a lot of that wholly within kind of stuff. So
I'm not particularly looking forward to it when it comes, but it'll come. It'll be fine. So
I remember when Cities of Sigmar, the old Free Guild kind of went over. It's certainly a lot harder to get some of those buffs. But right now, as it stands, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a nice run, so we've been going good.
Well, is there any particular scenarios that you enjoy the most, like whether it's a style or whether it's a particular scenario in general?
So anything with at least 4 or more objectives. Something like the new Scorched Earth, that's a lot of fun. A lot of fun for a Calibron because you've got such high movement and so many teleports. You can just wait a turn, wait for them to come out of their deployment zone, hopefully, and then just strike in turn 2, or you can just go ham. If they don't have any movement shenanigans, you can just lock them in their deployment zone and kill them. But yeah, mostly just ones with lots of objectives I like for Calibron and Daughters of Khaine specifically. But Hagnar, you generally want a few objectives, 2 or 3, especially if you're running Morathi, because you can really lock down control on those objectives. But my list really enjoys, high objective numbers.
I would imagine as well, Daughters of Khaine would enjoy anything with a shorter distance between the 2 deployment zones. So
18-inch deployment range.
Yeah, those ones.
Very, very fun for Daughters of Khaine because the 12-inch move with the Witch Elves and stuff, if you're auto-6ing, that gets you obviously 12 across, and then you're 6 inches away from the enemy. It's quite reliable. But 24 isn't too bad. Generally, I will just sit there in my deployment zone on turn 1 if the opponent gives it to me, unless I really need to lock something down with Morathi and go for a really, really long bomb charge, or perhaps teleport her if I really need to hold something down. But no, you just sit there for a turn and hopefully they'll come out.
Yeah, I think having that 18 inches is a really good chance. I mean, Morathi, that scares the living bejeebus out of me. That there's only 18 inches between me and Morathi.
The most fun thing to do is put a screen of life takers out at the front in like the very furthest edge of your deployment zone. The life takers can receive all your buffs. You get extra hits on 6s, re-rolling wounds, -1 random +1 damage from all your buffs. Then you can move them 14 inches. They're 4 inches away from your opponent's front lines. They roll the charge. They can fly over your opponent's screens and just whack the crap out of stuff.
Yeah.
So 18-inch deployments are lovely. So the life takers really, really excel in those kind of scenarios.
And I don't think I see a lot of opponents use flying units to their fullest strength. I got to play a game against one of the fine gentlemen from Bendigo, and he was using his Morghast from the OBR in that kind of way, right? You know, having a really good charge, then being able to fly over and then get into the juicy center. And I think that's where like a buffed up life takers, again, but with a smaller base than a Morghast, could pop that important hero, could pop that important wizard, could just absolutely cause terror to that wagon, like that, you know, war altar or
even if you don't roll high enough charge to get you deep into their back lines, you can just wipe out their screen and then just lock them in their deployment zone with 10 model screen. There's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, it's only 160 points.
That's it. It's a pretty it's pretty low risk investment.
Absolutely.
Probably the last and final question I've got for you before we kind of wrap things up is, you've been playing this book for a long time now, so I imagine you've got a lot of experience under your belt, and to go 16th at a 200+ player tournament is truly remarkable. You know, I've got to give you credit, because to win 5 games out of 6 is awesome, and to be the only Daughters of Khaine army and to rank in that 16 is crazy. It's crazy good. It's top 10. It's top 10 like, you know, material. What have you learnt in all of your time that if I was picking up the battle tome for the first time, I may not see it, might not be obvious to me when I'm reading and kind of putting my war scrolls together or my allegiances, or, you know, I'm reading something and then I try to do it on the table. What have you learnt that isn't obvious from just reading the battle tome alone?
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble with this one. It's there's a couple things. I mean, probably that movement is key. You learn that from most armies, but having an army that's so dependent on movement and so fast, and then going to something like Slaves of Darkness, which is my newest army, it's crippling. Especially, you just play entirely differently. Having the freedom of movement in Daughters of Khaine, it really allows for a really fun playstyle. And yeah, I just haven't found that. And in Slaves of Darkness, it's quite a different experience. But yeah, I'm not too sure really. The battle shock means nothing to Daughters of Khaine because of Witch Brew, but no, there's not a great deal of insight on that one, I'm afraid.
If I think about my experience playing with Daughters of Khaine, against Daughters of Khaine, that is, the first thing I'd probably say from the hobby perspective is that people starting now are so lucky because they've got contrast paint, because one of the biggest barriers to entry was painting up skin. And for some people, it's very difficult to paint skin and lady skin and not make it look like a dog's breakfast. So...
Yeah. An airbrush would probably be the one most painful experience. You definitely get an airbrush, otherwise it would be a very, very painful experience painting 120 flesh bodies.
So I would say, first off, from a hobby perspective, things like contrast is your friend if you're not confident on those. think about things like little weights or like little washers, because some of those models are very tipsy, like especially some of those dynamic witch elves, so they can be a bit of a pain in the butt on the table.
Yeah, I decided to do something silly and cut mine off the little plinth things that they're standing on as well, and mount them on really silly positions, jumping off as Azurite ruins. So most of them just fall off anyway, so I have to whack them down. But yeah, movement trays, definitely get some bloody movement trays, which elves are horrible to move around. Yeah, same as any 25 mil infantry, really. But yeah, it's horrendous.
The other things I'd probably call out is if you're going to build around witch elves and having a lot of attacks, make sure you're good or you're quick and on knowing how many dice to roll and being able to know your buffs, because that can really slow down the combat.
Yes. Playing Daughters of Khaine can be a slow army if you let it be a slow army. So have your dice in piles of 5, be organized, have markers for your buffs with them written on it, so you have no arguments as to which unit has the buff. Movement trays for speed. That's about it.
The last thing I would probably say is don't be too aggressive. I think there's a temptation that you play too aggressive, and I remember there were plenty of times where Liam would turn one charge me, and so what? Like he would take the first turn, he would charge me, I would have to accept the charge, and then I would often have 2 rounds to respond. And once you've kind of thrown the weight of your army forward once, it's hard to recover from that. So bide your time, wait for the right time to strike, get those buffs off, and then you will just absolutely obliterate in this one round of combat. There's just the sheer weight of attacks, the saves, the rend, the damage.
Just controlling the combat phase and allowing your opponent to hit your screens, and just controlling that combat phase. So important.
Yeah.
Instead of overextending. You can kind of catch up a little bit with Calibron, but you don't want to just throw one unit out and just have them bounce off something. So having enough units to make a concerted attack and actually be able to hit the things you need to hit is, very important. So that comes down to just play a judgment.
And I think the last call out we said right at the start of the show is don't worry about the allegiance rules. Don't worry for that table to kind of set up for a turn 3, re-roll ones to hit or re-roll ones to wound on the 4th turn. Just do what is right.
And I'd build your list before you throw it in a temple, because honestly, playing with Daughters of Khaine, there's so many beautiful models, and play with what you enjoy. You can make it work. So if you want to restrict yourself by starting in a temple first because you enjoy that play style because it's either defensive or fast or it hits a little bit harder, that's fine, but it's quite a lot better just to start writing your list, figure out what you want to play, how you want to play it, and then get the extra buffs and see either where you want to push and gild the lily a bit and get that extra damage, or if you need to round out some of your weaknesses. Look, there's lots of cool ways of doing it. I played Chuck more at Adepticon. He ran a Kraith at me at 180 or 200 witch elves. I beat him with my goblins. It was an absolute grind, but you could go that way. I'm seeing Liam right now building out a whole stake list. I'm seeing other people who are building around the avatars and doing some funny shenanigans with the avatars. I think there is something in there. If we could get rid of the mechanic of the avatars not being activated until turn 3, that'd be lovely. I'd love to run some avatars on foot, but you just can't risk them not doing anything in a competitive environment. But one day.
Hopefully soon. Danye, this has been incredible. I've learnt a lot. In the chat, there were people like, oh my God, finally, Daughters of Khaine content. I'm so excited. So I think there are people out there who have just been begging and craving for some insights on Daughters, because people aren't talking about them. They want to get back on the table. They just don't know how. So thank you for the experience and the knowledge.
No problem.
Actually, let's put a tinfoil hat. Warp Spider has thrown out a really good question. Let's tinfoil hat to bring this show to an end. When the new battle tome comes out, we don't know when. We don't know how or what. What would you like to see in the new Daughters of Khaine book? Whether is it new units? Is it changes to the book? Is there any concepts you want to bring in from we talked about the Underworld's warband and the Warcry warband. What would you like to see?
Okay, well, I've got a couple of things. I'd like to see a little less restriction on command traits, because both Calebron and Hagnar dictate the path of your command traits, so you can't take Morathi as your general and utilize the command traits from those temples. So a little bit less reliance on those, so that you could actually utilize Morathi's command ability and stuff. Morathi making Snake's battle line, that'd be lovely. So you could actually see some viable Temple Nest builds. Yeah, I'd love to see some more mortal wounds. So some kind of command ability for 6s to wound, let's say, or even hit, doing mortal wounds, but specifically only for witch elves. So utilizing their poison and stuff, because in their lore they do have access to quite a few poisons, and they are quite a sneaky society. And you can see quite a few of the poisons, like on the models and stuff as well. But yeah, I'd like to see Hagnar go on, personally. I'm not a fan of the playstyle. I don't think that's how Daughters of Khaine should play. They're meant to be a glass cannon, very, very fast, very hard hitting, but they shouldn't be a glass cannon brick wall. Why is there a glass cannon brick wall? I don't understand.
And maybe that's a good call out as well to the previous question, is that if you run Hagnar and you run lots of witch elves, you're probably setting yourself up for a bad player experience, because there's nothing worse than just hitting a brick wall of witch elves that are just so hard to take down, and people just get frustrated sometimes. So I think that's partially why people have walked away from Daughters of Khaine, because they just weren't having fun with their opponent. So
and stuff's gonna die for you to have fun. Like the most fun games I've had, my whole army's been gone by turn 3. So yeah, you've got to have fun. Yeah, and I enjoy stuff dying. I don't mind if it's mine. It's fine.
Yeah. I'd like to see a couple more models.
I'm pretty happy with the Underworld ones and the Warcry ones. I'm looking forward to see the rest of the Warcry.
So am I.
Yeah, I'd love for them to have a deep strike mechanic, as if they're coming out of Shadow, because then I wouldn't have much need for my Shadow Warriors. I could just stay within faction, just have a teleporting screen. That'd be lovely.
When I say models, by the way, I'd like to see maybe some prayers like the Khorne judgments. So bringing.
Yes, please. Yes.
I mean,
please.
you don't have an allegiance terrain. You don't have endless spells. You don't get any special endless spells. I'd like to see.
Prayers would be awesome. Either prayers or endless spells.
Yeah, I'd like to see some priests or priestesses that aren't there just for witch brew. I think that's usually why they're there. So having some endless spells or some endless prayers would be a different reason to bring the priestesses.
Yeah, that would be very cool. A giant sword of Cain, that would be bloody awesome. Actually, that's a good call.
Or maybe like a wave tide of blood or something. I don't know. Like the grave tide but blood, that'd be pretty cool.
I'm up for that though. That sounds good.
Maybe people, if you're watching this, guys, in the chat, pop in the comments section what you'd like to see from your Daughters of Khaine. I think it's some pretty cool stuff.
And someone model a grave tide purely out of blood, please. I'd love to see that.
I think you could probably almost do it. You could almost do it from the existing model. But Danye, if people wanted to talk to you after this, or if they wanted to find more about you or whatever that might be, any shout outs, where can they find you, blah, 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 do the big spruik.
I'm not much of a social person, so I don't really do the Twitter or Instagram or anything like that. In part of most of the Facebook groups. I'm in part of the Daughters of Khaine Facebook group. If anyone wants to chat to me about that, I'm more than happy. Keep an eye out for Scrubhammer. It's a battle report channel we got working on at the moment. Working on some terrain and stuff at the moment. We've managed to get 4 mats for our table now, and starting to get our armies painted up, and hopefully record some battle reports soon. So keep an eye out for Scrubhammer.
So shout out Scrubhammer. The channel's not out yet, is it?
No, not yet.
All
so
right. I was going to say I'd link it below, but it's not there yet. Any particular Facebook group that's that you'd recommend for a Daughters player?
So I'm pretty sure there's only one,
Okay,
as far as I'm aware. But
just type in Daughters of Khaine on Facebook. A group will come up. Merry Christmas.
Absolutely, mate. And it's a good group too. There's a fair bit of work still being posted every now and then too.
Yeah, I'd love it. And by the way, Warp Spy's, let's close out the show with Warp Spy's comment, and that is he'd love to see a massive cauldron terrain piece. So maybe an amidst shadow or something. So that's pretty sweet. I like that.
I've got. Hang on. Oh.
This better not be a bowl of blood.
Yeah, I took something. I made something like that for the what do you call the CanCon terrain that we had to bring. But I wish we did have a bigger one. That would be pretty grouse.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Dayne, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for your time and your knowledge. I hope everyone found this enjoyable and knowledgeable. If you did find value in the content here, do press like, do put in a comment to let us know what you found valuable, what you'd like to see in the new book, how you're building your lists. Thanks very much. I think let's close out the show. Get back in there, roll lots of sixes, and I will see you all again very soon.